Hey everybody, this is my 55-gallon gourami tank, and you'd never know it, but I just got in there 2 days ago and I thinned out my red tiger lotus that you can see off to the right. I noticed that there were a couple of new shoots coming up, but I didn't really think they were going to just skyrocket to the surface like that. But you can see I've got two new shoots right to the surface. The one is sort of small. I think it just got there. I think given some time that will open up and become a little bit larger there on the left. But the one on the right is already a big full-size leaf. If we open the lid here, you can see how much surface area that's covering. And then of course the smaller one over here has more or less just gotten to the surface, so that's going to take a little bit of time to rotate the proper direction. And being that it's right there in the current of the spray bar, that one may not roll over and develop properly. I don't know, but the one alone is really taking up a lot of space on the surface. That blocks a lot of light. I don't mind it too much, but I don't want to let the plant get in the habit of sending all of its leaves right to the surface. And the more frequently you allow the plants to do that, it's almost like, I don't want to anthropomorphize the plant, but it's almost like once it finds the surface, that's where it keeps wanting to send its new leaves, because ultimately that's the goal. It's not really meant to be an underwater plant. It's meant to send its leaves up through the water and then of course float on the surface, and then eventually you'll get lily pads and flowers and everything else that goes along with the lilies if you let them do their thing at the surface. I try to control it and keep it in the tank and keep it dense and compact, but you also, there's a balance. You've got to let it develop its leaves enough that you get some nice rich full color and you get plenty of light on it, and make it a good healthy plant. So I had cut it back real heavily not too long ago, and I was afraid maybe I'd overdone it. And you can see now that I'm getting some pretty good new growth coming in. I've got some new growth down here at the bottom. Now, that one does not look like it's going to shoot straight to the top. You can see that it's already got a leaf unfurling, and it's already that, it's still that close to the bottom. Usually, when you're going to get these long runners like this, they'll be halfway up through the water column, and they'll still have a tiny little leaf. I mean, you see this one's all way up here, and it's still a small leaf that's still half furled. So when you see them down here like this already opening up, that's going to be one of these more stocky and compact leaves that is going to stay down here in the water column, which is what I want. And of course, by the time we get down to the bottom, all of these leaves create quite the amount of shade down there on the bottom too. So as far as anything else going on with this tank, not a lot. I was noticing earlier the whiptail catfish that I put in here. I put a Royal Farluella, and of course I don't see it now. Oh yes, I do. In fact, I can even see exactly what I'm talking about, though it's going to be tough to see it come out on camera. The tail of the whiptail forks. There's my little chocolate gourami swimming by. If you look right on that rock, you'll see where that tail of the fish is. I know it's really hard to make out, but if you look, let's see if I can get my finger in here. If you look at this little tiny tan line right there, that is one of the filaments on the tail of the whiptail. The other filament should be right here, and it's not. It's missing. So I'm not sure what chewed the filament off, but something in there has removed one of the caudal filaments from that Farluella. Not too concerned about it. It doesn't look like it's been removed so far back that it's going to cause any kind of damage or fear of infection. It also doesn't look like it's back, I honestly don't even know what it would be called in a human. I guess you could think of it as the equivalent of the nail bed. So as long as the damage doesn't get done that far back, the tail will grow back just fine, or that little filament will grow back just fine. If the damage goes too far back, where basically the construction of the tail happens, then no, it won't come back anymore after that. But I don't think it was that kind of damage. I don't think it was that serious. And so it shouldn't take too long, and we'll be able to see that tail growing back no problem. Unless, of course, whatever it was that munched it off is still going to munch it off when it grows back, or it's going to, harass the fish even more. We'll have to wait and see. And it's hard to say which fish it was. With all the gouramis I have in this tank, you'd think, all those long filament-like fins on the gouramis, and then, of course, if you can see that angelfish drifting across the back there, that's got quite a bit of finnage on that one, too. If there's something in there that likes to nip fins, you'd think that'd be a prime specimen, and yet that's untouched and magnificent. Who knows? Maybe it was that fish out of jealousy trying to, for fear of the Farluella trying to outdo him or something. I don't know. I doubt that's the case, but you never know. I don't know who else would have done it. So, real quick, I guess we can have a little stroll around the room while I've got my artificial sun turned off. I'd actually come down here to turn all the other fish lights off and then leave that one on for a little while, but I decided I would shoot some video. In fact, let's come back and look at this tank here. My 29, I recently put a clown pleco in it that had been in my quarantine tank for months now. I'd almost forgotten it was in there. I did know it was in there, but I was just sort of treating it like it lived in that tank. And it just kind of occurred to me yesterday that, it really was meant to go in this 29 miscellaneous here. Excuse me. If you can see the glass and see how much, scum and stuff is growing on the glass, you can see some of that brown diatom is growing on the Anubias in there. The Anubias is doing well enough, but you let that diatom start growing on there, and suddenly you don't have a lot of really good growth anymore because it's blocking a lot of the light. Light is very important for plants. I will be talking more about light here in the near future. In terms maybe most people that think about fish tanks aren't going to be used to hearing about. I've got that new artificial sun that I was talking about, jokingly calling it my artificial sun. It's an LED grow light, and it's a serious grow light. It's not, meant for putting over a fish tank for growing these little low light plants or anything like that. But I have been asked to talk a little bit more about it, and I intend to anyway because I'm using it as a tank light. I've got a couple of open top tanks sitting underneath of it, in addition to a bunch of other plants all around it. And of course the light needs of the various plants differ, where I have them located in front of the grow light and so on and so forth. So I will talk more about that. If anybody's interested in that, make sure you're subscribed. That way you won't miss that one coming up. I'll put that on my aquarium lighting playlist. And again, that'll be in the very near future, where I'll be actually talking about plant growth and the lighting needs of plants and so on and so forth. So in the meantime, when I had come down here this evening to shut the lights off and leave the artificial sun on for a little while, I noticed that the clown pleco that I put in this tank was out, and he was sitting on that little piece of wood right there. And try as I might to get him on video, it was just not happening with all the glare behind me. These tanks have become like mirrors now that I have a really, really intense light source in the middle of the room. When I've got that LED turned on, the camera does not do it justice. How intense that light is does not convey, because the camera automatically adjusts for it. It goes from blackness to, okay, now you can see what it looks like, but you don't get the impression of how actually bright that is. So when it's on like that, it just lights up the room, and then all of my tanks again turn into mirrors. So now that we've got it off, like I said, we can have a little informal stroll around the room. Wasn't really prepared to do a round the world update, but here we can look at this real quick. You've heard me talk about my high fin spotted pleco. I've got one of these in my native tank, and I don't think it's the same species of fish as this one. I really don't. It could be, but I'm not so sure. I like the tail fin on this one. The tail fin has got that sort of lyre tail appearance to it, but the markings on the side to me just don't seem the same. The spots on the fins seem the same, but the markings on the body seem more spotted on this fish, and it seems more like it's sort of like little mottled shapes on the other one. Let's see if the other one's out. And we'll see if we can get a look at him in the same video. And of course he's not. I did just fix the lighting here on my Black Ghost Knifefish tank, so it's really bright again. I've got 4 high output T5s on there. The only thing I want to do to this tank now is I want to get that back of it covered so you can't see that ugly wood paneling back there. That was just, that was what the basement looked like when we moved in. So that's what's still there all these years later, because this only became a fish room a few years ago. This was actually just the basement storage area for many, many years before I started putting fish tanks up. And little by little, it ended up the fish room we know and love today. So I'm not seeing that pleco in this tank. Forgot what we were looking for a moment there. So we'll just come around here. I didn't really mention this tank the other day. I did a sort of semi-informal around the world. The lighting that I had originally done on this tank had gone kaput. I had put one of those cheap LED panels on it, and I haven't tinkered with it. It's just a bad connection somewhere. I have to take the whole thing apart and put it back together and make sure all the connections are solid. So what I did was I built another one that actually fits it properly. I didn't measure the other one right. I've mentioned before I'm not handy when it comes to building stuff and measuring and cutting and stuff like that. I know my weaknesses, and that is one of them. I will be readily admit to not being good at doing stuff like that. So what I wound up doing was taking some other LEDs that I wound up buying by accident that were not waterproof. They're just bare diodes on one of those little tape strips. So I made another little unit, and I've got it properly powered this time and everything, but it's not waterproof, so I have to be a little more careful with this one. I don't think there's any risk of any fire or anything. I think it would just short out, and that would be the end of it. I also have it plugged into a plug strip that's got not only a fuse in it but a surge protector, so I'm not too worried about those kinds of issues, but I am worried about it not working anymore if it gets wet. So again, I just sort of have to keep that in mind when I've got the lid off and I'm doing water changes and stuff. And I don't know if you noticed that little movement down here, but we got a brief appearance from my rubber lip pleco. There's only 3 fish in this tank. That rubber lip pleco, my gudgeon up here, I don't know if you've noticed him or her sitting up here, and then I've got that little bumblebee catfish that lives down in the murky depths down there that I occasionally see, but nobody else ever does. So, interesting tank in one sense, but very much a boring tank in another. Awesome fish, though. Love this fish. That's why I've never really done anything with this tank. I can't think of any fish I could put in here that this fish wouldn't bully around. I've got an angelfish in quarantine right now that I was thinking about putting in this tank. I think it would look beautiful in here, but I don't trust this gudgeon. I think this gudgeon would beat up on it. I had to actually take my T-bar out of this tank because my T-bar was getting damaged to it. This gudgeon here was beating on my T-bar cichlid. And my camera always has a hard time focusing on this fish just because of the way the colors are and the background colors and everything. It's a tough one to get a good, clear video of. So, I did also want to mention this evening this Apanageton, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's just growing out of control. It was a small plant that I put in there. It shot up these other plants, or these stalks, and now I've got all these up here, which are just baby plants, so you can even see roots developing off of them already. I know they blend in with all the roots from the water sprite behind them, but I can clearly see roots developing off them. They look like little, tiny baby daylilies, really. Well, you can kind of see the little roots developing right there. So I don't know what to do with them. Maybe I'll try those in my native tank. I don't know if those are native around here or not, but they look pretty cool in there. I think the tilapia that's in there would put a beating on them pretty quickly because they look kind of tender and delicious, but I don't know. That's just me. I'm not a fish. Maybe they're terrible tasting. We'll have to maybe just experiment with that and see. And don't forget, I do sell my excess and overflowing aquarium plants. So go down below into the description and check out my Gmail address and contact me if you're interested in hooking up with any plants. It's usually water sprite and java fern that I've always got tons of. But you never know. I could have something else. It's always worth just contacting me to see what I've got available. And then, of course, like I say, if you want water sprite or java fern, I've always got that. So hit me up in my Gmail. You'll find that down below in the description. So one of the other things I've been thinking about was shooting videos down here. If you'll notice, this video is kind of rambling and ambling, and I don't really have anything specific on my mind, is I'm running into the problem of either too many or not enough. I either don't feel like coming in here and shooting video, but the reason I don't a lot of times is because it just feels overwhelming. I want to mention this, I want to talk about that, I want to point this out, and so I either have to come down here 3 times a day and upload 6 videos, or I just say whatever, and then I wind up getting around to doing some, water change video, or I do a feeding video or something like that, and I never really wind up talking about the things I want to talk about, or shooting videos of the tanks I want to look at. So tonight's going to be kind of a rambly video. The other aspect is I do want views, and in order to get views, you got to have titles that get found in searches, and you've got to have titles that make people want to watch them. And me titling a video, my rambling fish chat is not likely to attract a lot of views, and quite frankly, I'm sure a lot of people would read that title and go, yeah, it's really something I want to listen to. Some guy rambling about his fish in his own fish room, So, like I say, it's, hit or miss. It's one way or the other. I still have 2 of those coolie loaches in here. I've tried several times to get them out, but every time I attempt to get them, it's just a nightmare trying to catch them. And I will say with this angelfish here, this so far has been a success story with an injured or a sick angelfish that I brought home from the big chain pet store. It looked really rough when I brought it home, but I liked it, so I brought it home anyway. And then it went through several days of having like white fuzzy stuff on its lips. I treated it with Pimafix and Aquarium salt. And for the first time I've used Pimafix without killing a fish. I did a half dose of it, and within a couple days the lip was looking better, but it started developing fin rot on its lower anal fin, or the lower part of its anal fin rather. So once again, I took it out of the tank it was in. It used to be in my other quarantine tank that's in my other room, and I brought it over here, did a big water change on this tank, and got the tank ready for it. And you'll see how its anal fin is sort of stunted and chopped off, but it looks healthy now. I did get all that rotten part, eventually just fell off and drifted away, and I did another water change. I've got a little bit of aquarium salt, and again, about a half dose of Pimafix, and so far, it looks like it's doing okay. I haven't really had any issues. Its behavior is beginning to act normal again. It's going from clamped fins and sitting near the surface to actually swimming around and feeding regularly. So I have high hopes for this angelfish. Now, the only question is where to put it. As I said, I was thinking about putting it in the gudgeon tank, but I just don't know if that's going to work. It certainly can't go in this tank, which already has 2 full-grown angelfish. So that one seems to be pretty small and stunted down there. I might try to see if I can get away with putting that in a 10-gallon tank like it's in now. If it was in that tank, upstairs, maybe that might work. I don't know. We'll see. And since we've talked about every other tank, we may as well have a look at Butterbean's tank here. The tank is not dirty. Well, the tank is dirty. The water's not dirty. I was going to say I had to find Butterbean for a minute. He's in the back there. It's a little late for me to be down here in front of the tank. He's probably wondering what I'm doing. So that is all just simple diatom algae. It grows on the glass over time. No big deal at all. Next time I'm doing a water change, I'll just get in there and wipe the glass down, and no issues whatsoever. You can see all that white stuff in there. That is a snail shell graveyard. That's what all that white stuff is snail shells. Well, now that I'm looking at it, I think this piece right here and maybe one or two of these might be some chunks of krill that didn't get eaten and fell to the bottom of the tank. But the bumblebee gobies and the, believe it or not, the mollies will nibble away at that, and by tomorrow morning that will be gone. So I'm not worried about it. But all that other white stuff you see in there is shells from snails, and Butterbean not only chews them up when he eats them, but he goes around, like during the day, I'll come in here and I'll see him just picking up pieces of shells and crunching on them like he's bored. He might be hungry in the way, you know, all animals are always hungry, but he's certainly not lacking for food and eating the shells because he's being starved and I'm not feeding him enough. If anything, he gets fed too much. I don't know why he's being so camera shy. He's usually camera shy when I'm using this camera. I don't know why. The 5 years I've been shooting video of him with this camera, but he still does not like this camera. So he's going to go hide. I was going to say, there you can see him a little bit through the murk. He's in his little cave in the middle of the tank. It's where he likes to hide when he wants to feel secure, but you know, he still gets a good view. He can poke his head out and see what's going on, but still feel like he's hiding in his cave. So, on the final note, I will say, here's my garden tank. I'm going to go ahead and turn this light back on. So, I was going to say shield your eyes, but the camera will do that for you. And now it is daytime again. So lots to talk about here, but we're not going to in this video. I wanted to talk about everything but this tank in this video. I don't want to overdo it, and again, there's just tons and tons and tons to talk about. We'll talk about the light, and we'll talk about this tank. I put a new plant down here. Still want to talk about my catnip and compare it to my catnip outside, and so on and so forth. So make sure you're subscribed, and then that way you won't miss anything I've got coming up on that. Or anything else. So don't forget, this one here is my new garden tank, and look forward to videos of this coming up real soon. Thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave me your feedback down below in the comments section. I'd be glad to hear from you. Thanks again. I'll see you real soon.